regards to Egypt. Thank you. I'd like to make one comment
Sure.
in regards to follow up on what you're saying from experience that I had when I was working on a project in Africa. And I may have said this before, but to repeat for today, I went to the State Department to get a book on demographics. And I asked for the book on Africa. And I listed the countries that I wanted to see. When I said Senegal and I said Nigeria, I got one book. When I mentioned Egypt, the lady says, no, that's not in Africa. And I was arguing the point. But then I realized I needed the information. What she said, that's in the Middle East. So I have two books. I have them at home now. One book of demographics on the Middle East, which covers the top part of Africa. That's above the Sahel Desert. And then the other part is Africa. They refer to that as Black Africa.
Yes.
So it ties into the point
Yes.
that you're making there.
Now, once again, Middle East. Middle East of what?
Yeah.
Where does the term come from? The term comes from Great Britain. At the time when Britain had colonies all over the world, China was the farthest place from Britain where they maintained a steady colony. That was the far east of Great Britain. The area of North Africa and Asia Minor, that was the middle distance away from Great Britain that they controlled. India and everything else like that. So that's where so the very term Middle East itself is a term of colonization. A fraternity brother of mine called me recently from over in Iraq, and he's over there with the military, and I was kidding him about being part of the invading force and being a colonialist, and he had no idea what I was talking about. You know, he said, "No, I'm in the Middle East. I'm not in the colony." I said, "Well, you know, that's what the term means. Middle East means colony right in and of itself." See? Now, Herodotus says this also. But as far as human beings go, this is what they said, and were in agreement with one another, that the Egyptians were the first in mankind to invent the year. That the Egyptians were the first of mankind to invent the year and to make 12 divisions of the seasons for it. They said that this invention of the year was based on the stars. Their reckoning, in my opinion, is much clearer than that of the Greeks, for the Greeks must insert one intercentenary month every other year. So at this point, what Herodotus was saying was that we have our own calendar, and they have their calendar. Based upon everything I've studied, it appears to me that the Egyptians were the first people in the world to invent a calendar. And theirs much better than ours, because we got to adjust ours every other year. Okay? Now think about that. And when we talk about Egypt again, we're talking about what was consistent in the entirety of Africa. Think about the whole process of inventing a calendar. We take it for granted. But to really understand the calendar, at a minimum, you've got to understand the cycle of the sun and the earth. So you say, well, it's not that hard. Okay, you know, it doesn't take too many years to figure out 4 seasons and 365 years. There's 365 days, you know, well, actually 365 and a quarter days. But then the second part of that is, and to divide it into 12 sections. Those 12 sections also correspond on a grand scale to the 12 divisions of the zodiac. And to understand the 12 divisions of the zodiac, you've got to understand not 365 and a quarter days, but 25,820 years. The period of time it takes for the sun to make one full cycle from where it starts in the universe and comes back to the other place. When you go in the bar these days, they tell me young folk go to the bar, I ask, what's your sign? Well, that little simple statement, what's your sign, is based upon information that's millennia old. Things that came out of Africa. Telling time was invented in Africa. Done everywhere in the world now. But telling time came out of Africa. Europe cannot claim that. Asia cannot claim that. North and South America cannot claim that. That's an African invention. I'm not going to do all these. Herodotus goes through he has a whole series of things he says that talk about the things he observed in Egypt. There was a story I heard years ago about this professor at Harvard who had a couple of PhDs, and he was a lecturer on Herodotus and on ancient history. And he told his class he agreed with everything that Herodotus said, except that the Egyptians were black. Didn't agree with that. And one student questioned him, said, and the teacher took umbrage. How dare you question me? I'm Dr. So-and-so and so. I've written all these books and all this study, why would you take Herodotus' word over mine? And the student said very simply, well, he was there. Louis Agassiz, the Frenchman, said, to go back again to the negative stuff, he was a leading naturalist in France. This compact continent of Africa exhibits a population which has been in constant intercourse with the white race, which has enjoyed the benefit of the example of the Egyptian civilization, of the Phoenician civilization, of the Roman civilization, of the Arab civilization, and nevertheless, there's never been a regulated society of black men developed on the continent. Hegel again, of course, said Africa is no part of human history. The Putnam Monthly quoted some noted scientists and said, the most minute and most careful researcher has yet failed to discover a history of any knowledge of ancient times among Negro races. They have invented no writing, not even the crude picture writing of the lowest tribes. They have no gods, they have no heroes, no epic poems, no legends, not even simple traditions. Herodotus said, when young men pass old men, they step off the curb. Okay? There never existed among them an organized government. They never ruled a hierarchy or established a church. Herodotus said, based on his research, all the gods came from Egypt, from Africa.
Let me say
Sir.
this. Let me say this, Doc. And
Yes.
Class and others. I was there last year before last. I went 250 feet down in the largest pyramid.
Okay?
Right? I walked on that ring. If you go to Egypt, you know that you have walked on the ground that the gods walked on.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell it. You can feel it. Going there. If you can, go to Egypt. Go to Kemet.
One of the good things, of course, about Kemet is that whereas other parts of Africa fell into all kinds of ruin as Africa and Egypt was attacked time and time again, and people began wandering to get away from the attack. There's an excellent book, by the way, called 2000 Seasons by the author Aikwe Amar. Gorgeous prose poem book. He wrote a prose poem that talks about the 2000 seasons that took us to get into this mess that we're in, and how folks kept moving away, trying to move away from the invaders. And a lot of our cultural artifacts were lost. The wonderful thing about Egypt, however, is that in Egypt they built in stone. And so it's still there.
Right.
You can go and see things now that have been there for 5,000 to 6,000 years. So there's no doubt whatsoever. Right. Initially I felt kind of bad about Egypt because my mind had fallen into the same trap that we often fall into. You think Egypt, you think Arabs. But the Arabs were not in Egypt at the time when Egypt was Egypt. When Egypt was Egypt, there were Africans there. Just as if you go to Milwaukee now, you don't find Native Americans. You find white Germans and other people who've come there since. So once you get past the fact that the people who in Egypt now, who are actually guarding the materials, in many cases controlling the materials, are not the indigenous folks who were there when the materials were created. The folks who are now interpreting this stuff were not the ones who created it. when you get past that, and you come to recognize that you can see in outline form on the walls of Egypt the basic corpus, the basic body of the culture that existed throughout Africa. That makes it very good for us because, particularly us as African Americans, we would have no other link of getting back to that. In many cases, the looking at the South African versions of the culture are so different than what we're used to that we have a hard time even relating to it. I had a hard time the first time that I tried to listen to African music, because African music is polyrhythmic and polyphonic. And I'd been taught 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and stuff that was syncopated and off the beat was upsetting to me because I wasn't used to it. So that, you know, in much the same way, when I first saw abstract art, first saw African art, I thought African art looked strange because I was used to the very simple representational stuff that comes out of Europe. Only after I came to understand European abstract art could I then go back and look at its parent, African abstract art. African art was abstract 10,000 years ago. European artists got abstract about 100 years ago. Okay, African music was polyphonic and polyrhythmic thousands of years ago. European music just got to be polyphonic and polyrhythmic in the last 50 to 100 years. In fact, there's a piece by Stravinsky called Le Sacre de Printemps, the Rite of Spring. The first time that was played in the Paris Opera House, the folk got so upset, they burned the Opera House down. They rioted, burned the place down. Because they just weren't used to, to the music that was that different. And all Stravinsky was doing was copying stuff that's done in Africa for thousands of years. Now we have some American folks here. Benjamin Franklin says, I could wish that their black numbers were increased. And while in, I could wish their numbers were increased, and while we are, as I may call it, scouring the planet by clearing America of woods, and so making this side of the globe reflect a brighter light to the eye of the inhabitants of Mars and Venus, why should we darken its people? Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding the blacks and Tonys of increasing the lovely white and the red? That's good old Ben Franklin. Thomas Jefferson says, I advance it therefore as a suspicion only that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the white in the endowment of both body and mind. Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, said, there is a physical difference between the black and the white races that I believe will forever forbid the two races from living together on terms of social and political equality. Inasmuch as they cannot live so, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior. And as much as any man, and I, as much as any man, are in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. Negro equality, fudge. How long in the government of a God great enough to make and rule the universe shall there continue to be knaves to fend and fools to quip so low a place of demagoguery as this? That's what the great emancipator said. But Africa's also had people who understood its importance. Okay. Count Volney was a French count who was a contemporary of Napoleon. He went to Egypt along with the scores of people Napoleon took with him when they first found Egypt. It shocked them, it blew their minds. It's blown the Europeans' minds to this very day. If you took the Egyptian and African art exhibits out of the major museums of the world, they might as well close the doors. The most important thing in the Louvre Museum in Paris is the meter ball. That meter ball came out of the temples of Egypt. It was used to measure the pyramids, and now is the standard of measurement in the world. Count Volney went to Africa, went to Egypt, and he wrote this: "There are people now forgotten, discovered while others were yet barbarians, the elements of the arts and sciences, a race of men now rejected for their black skins and woolly hair, founded on the study of the laws of nature."